This is Sapphire Kerner, and this is my Q&Q number 4. Today I'm talking about the book Latinas in TV. Um, and the quote that I picked to talk about is this quote that says, it's about color blindness in media and in TV. It says, color blindness is inherently seductive in a well-intended society full of liberal guilt, one that can then avail itself of certain legal discourses, for instance, justice is blind, and thus objective and fair. These legal discourses are hegemonic and are the foundations of other institutions, especially institutions like television that brand themselves as ideologically, socially progressive. So I picked this quote because it talks about something that's really important. And also, there's another quote that I want to talk about that talks about tokenism and how that works. But picked this one because I think that it's really important that in the introduction she talks about the idea of post-racial America and what that means. Because Obama was elected when I was about 8, so I grew up in this like post-racial America. And even though I didn't really hear those words until I got into college, I definitely lived that experience, especially being in upstate New York in a very like white place and with like a decent amount of white liberalism, but also a lot of white conservatism. Um, so I think it's really important to first talk about like what post-racial America means and how it's a lie and how colorblindness is a lie as well. Um, Post-racial America claiming that since we had a black president, Barack Obama, that we had moved past racism and that was over. I feel like this opens the door, and like this article talks about it, or this introduction talks about it, it opens the door to, instead of having overt racism, to having covert racism, because we have in our country built in systematic racism, which is much more dangerous than out loud racism and blatant racism, because that affects how who gets jobs, who gets into school, scholarships. It affects your way of life. So when you have systematic racism, it's something that's a lot more insidious. So I really appreciate and like that the book kind of starts off talking about and disproving the idea that just because Obama was president doesn't mean that we had a post-racial America. And it says even now, like with we're in the the middle of really bad um, backlash to that because we have President Trump and how white conservatism is saying no, we don't have color blindness, and then that comes into the idea of what's wrong with color blindness, and color blindness is a really problematic term because if you're colorblind, that means that you don't see color, which means that you don't see also the difference in experiences that color can add. So if you're like, oh, I'm white and I'm colorblind, I see everyone equally. That's not how it works. Colorblindness is a problem because it's disproving and taking the value out of the fact that different people have different experiences. And because of those experiences, they need different things. It's the difference between equality and equity, ignoring the fact that sometimes, like if you come from a different background, you will need more support. Everyone can't get the same thing because some people need more. So that's why colorblindness is a problem. And I really enjoy that they brought this up and the idea of tokenism. And it also talks about how during this colorblind era and this post-racial era, actors of color were hired more, but they were playing these roles that were meant for white actors. And that's problematic because you can't just say, oh, I'm just going to take people of color, Latinx people or black people or whatever color, and just put them in a role for a white person and then just say, oh, it's diverse, it's all the same. So and that's a problem because this happens a lot with Asian actors as well, where they're put in roles that are just very blatantly obviously for white people. They don't bother to change the roles or make the roles possibly reflect an experience that these people of color have had. So that's a problem, and it's very apparent when you like look closely at it. So I think that it's important that we cover this, and also the idea that since we're in a colorblind era and we have tokenism on TV, we can stop being progressive in other places, where it talks about how on TV there might have been more people of color, but in legislature they dropped down affirmative action and stuff like that. So the things that the actually push to help people of color are taken away while we add more people of color to television and then claim that we're being proactive and claim that we're helping people when we're really not. My overreaching question is, how does tokenism and color blindness and all of those ideas negatively affect how people of color, especially children of color, growing up in this period, how does that negatively affect how they feel about themselves? And also, how does that affect how shocking it is that they grew up in this era of being colorblind and like ever extremely progressive apparently, and then now we're in Trump's America? How did this era of like basically lies really affect how these people growing up in it feel about themselves? Thank you.